Hello everyone. Today we are going to explain you about the chapter Socialism in Europe and the Russian Revolution. The French Revolution created a possibility of making a dramatic change in the way in which society was structured. People in Europe were divided into three major groups. Some were conservatives, while others were liberals or radicals. Who were conservatives?
Conservatives were the people who did not want any change in the society. However, after the 19th century, they accepted the changes but also believed the past needed to be respected and change should begin slowly.
Who were liberals?
They dreamt of a nation where all religions are considered equal. They were not in the favor of monarchy. Instead, they wanted an elected parliamentary government. But on the other hand, they believed that everyone should not be given the right to vote. Only property owners should be allowed to vote, and they did not either support the suffragette movements.
Suffragette movements campaigned to give women the right to vote. Who were radicals?
Radicals agreed to liberals when it came to religious tolerance and removal of the powers of monarchy. On the other hand, they believed in giving everyone the right to vote.
As you can see, the thinking differentiated between these three groups. While these debates were going on, changes were happening on the economic side too.
Industrial society and social change. This was the time of social and economic change. It was also the beginning of the Industrial Revolution.
Industrial Revolution saw the formation of new cities, development of industrial regions, and the expansion of the railways.
Sometimes, the low demand of goods resulted in unemployment too. Most of the factory owners were often liberals and radicals, and they felt that workers' efforts must be encouraged.
The coming of socialism to Europe.
Socialists were against private property and saw it as the root of all social ills of the time. They wanted to change it and campaigned for it.
Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels added that industrial society was capitalist who owned the capital invested in factories and the profit of capitalists was produced by workers. Capitalism and the rule of private property were overthrown.
Support for socialism. By the 1870s, socialist ideas spread through Europe. Workers in Germany and England began forming associations to fight for better living conditions. The Russian Revolution.
In 1914, Nicholas II ruled the Russian Empire. The Russian Empire included territories around Moscow, current-day Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, parts of Estonia, parts of Poland, Ukraine, and Belarus.
Economy and society during the Russian Empire.
About 85% of the Russian Empire's population earned their living from agriculture. The industry was limited in number. Workers were divided into groups, but they did unite to strike work when they were dissatisfied.
Peasants had no respect for nobility. Very unlike the French peasant, Russian peasants were the only peasant community which pooled their land and their commune divided it.
Socialism in Russia.
All political parties were illegal in Russia before 1914. In 1900, the Russian Socialist Democratic Labour Party was formed.
It struggled to give peasants their rights over land that belonged to nobles, as land was divided among peasants periodically, and it was felt that peasants and not workers would be the main source of revolution.
But Lenin did not agree with this, as he felt that peasants were not one social group. The party was divided into Bolsheviks and Mensheviks. Lenin led Bolshevik group.
A turbulent time. The 1905 revolution. Liberals wanted to end the autocracy of the Tsar. They worked towards demanding a constitution during the revolution of 1905. Bloody Sunday. In 1904, prices of essential goods rose so quickly that the real wages declined by 20%. When 4 members of the Putilov Iron Works were dismissed, there was a call for industrial action. over 110,000 workers in St. Petersburg went on strike demanding a reduction in working hours and increase in wages.
This procession was attacked. Over 100 workers were killed. Strikes took place as a reaction. People demanded a constituent assembly.
The Tsar allowed the creation of an elected consultative parliament or Duma. The Tsar dismissed the first Duma within few days and announced the election of a second Duma. The First World War and the Russian Empire. In Russia, the First World War was initially very popular, but later the support grew thin.
Anti-German sentiments ran high in Russia. Russian armies lost badly in Germany and Austria. The war also affected the industry. There was labor shortage.
By 1916, railway lines began to break down. The small workshops were closed down. There was shortage of grain and hence of bread.
The February Revolution in Petrograd.
In the winter of 1917, Petrograd was grim. There was a food shortage in the quarters of workers. On 22nd February, a lockout took place at a factory.
Workers of 50 other factories joined in sympathy. Women also led and participated in the strikes. This came to be called the International Women's Day.
The government imposed a curfew. On the 24th and 25th, the government called out the cavalry and the police to keep an eye on them.
The police headquarters were ransacked. Cavalry was called out again. An officer was shot at the barracks of a regiment and other regiments mutinied. Voting to join the striking workers gathered to form a Soviet or council. This was the Petrograd Soviet.
A delegation went to meet the Tsar. Military commanders advised him to abdicate. On 2nd March, the Tsar abdicated. Soviet leaders and Duma leaders formed a provisional government to run the country.
Restrictions on public meetings and associations were removed. Soviets were set up everywhere. In individual areas, factory committees were formed which began questioning the way industrialists ran their factories.
Soldiers' committees were formed in the army. The provisional government saw its power declining and Bolshevik influence grow. Therefore, it decided to take stern measures against the spreading discontent.
It resisted attempts by workers to run factories and arrested leaders. Peasants and the socialist revolutionary leaders pressed for a redistribution of land. Land committees were formed and peasants seized land.
Revolution of October 1917. Lenin persuaded the Petrograd Soviet and Bolshevik Party to agree to a socialist seizure of power. A military revolutionary committee was appointed by the Soviets to organize seizure.
Prime Minister Kerensky left the city to summon troops. Military men loyal to government seized the buildings of two Bolshevik newspapers. Pro-government troops were sent to take over telephone and telegraph offices and protect the Winter Palace.
In response, Military Revolutionary Committee ordered to seize government offices and arrest the ministers. The Aurora ships shelled the Winter Palace. Other ships took over strategic points.
By night, the city had been taken over and the ministers had surrendered. All Russian Congress of Soviets in Petrograd approved the Bolshevik action.
There was a heavy fighting in Moscow. By December, the Bolsheviks controlled the Moscow-Petrograd area. The people involved were Lenin, the Bolsheviks, troops, pro-government.
Most industry and banks were nationalized. Land was declared social property and peasants were allowed to seize the land for nobility.
Use of old aristocratic titles was banned. New uniforms were designed for the army and officials.
Russia became a one-party state. Trade unions were kept under party control. A process of centralized planning was introduced. This led to economic growth. Industrial production increased. An extended schooling system developed and cultivation of farms started. The Civil War.
When the Bolsheviks ordered land redistribution, the Russian army began to break up. Non-Bolshevik socialists liberals, and supporters of autocracy condemned the Bolshevik uprising. They were supported by many troops. All these fought a war with the Bolsheviks,
making a socialist society.
The Bolsheviks kept industries and banks nationalized during the Civil War. Rapid construction and industrialization started. An extended schooling system was developed.
Stalin and collective farming. Stalin believed that rich peasants and traders stocked supplies to create shortage of grains. Hence, collectivization was the need of the hour. Farmers who resisted collection were punished, deported, or exiled. Global influence.
In many countries, communist parties were formed. By the time of the outbreak of the Second World War, the USSR had given socialism a global world stature.
By the end of the 20th century, the international reputation of the USSR as a socialist country had declined.